Hey, everybody, this is Luca, the co host of the Movie Pope podcast, and today I have Neeta Singh from New Delhi on the show, and we're going to talk about her interest and her work in teaching Shakespeare. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in.
Your observations are very valid.
Okay, excellent.
First of all, yeah. First of all, I think there is a universal appeal, and for my point of view, humanity itself is being examined. So, irrespective of, as you said, religion, culture, boundaries, what we have here is an examination, or rather, interpretation of human beings, their moods, their anxieties, their performance, their euphoria, so on and so forth. So this
yeah.
conglomeration, yeah,
hmm
this conglomeration of expressions are there in every walk of life. We may fail to see it. And I think if you are a good reader of Shakespeare's plays, somewhere, somewhere in your mind, uh, some odd fairness or evaluation, or I would say even risk taking. Because when I teach Othello, okay, I have to kind of modernize the context. I cannot just talk about, a fair skinned Desdemona and a very, very, dark Moor. So, in order to make it more legitimate in today's context, the idea is to drive home the point that we all have to adapt to each other, even though we come from conflicting backgrounds. And that is the triumph. That is the triumph of humanity. It is not about how beautiful a person is or which race is more dominant, because things are always going to change and things are always going to be in a state of flux. So I'm saying it in a simplest possible manner, and I hope it makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense because because there are some people who say, well, we definitely need to keep Shakespeare in context because he was writing in the late 16th and early 17th centuries, and the stories and the characters are based within that time period, if not earlier. But
Yes,
but to your point, it's also important to realize that there are lessons to be learned from these plays, regardless of when they were set. So I do want to ask. So out of all of my guests that I've had so far, you're the first person from India who I've had on the show. I do want to ask, what is it about Shakespeare that appeals to you in your context, in your culture?
um see, it would be difficult to say vis-a-vis um, our culture, but I think that we have this tendency to prioritize sharing. Sharing is sounds very simple, but sharing, I would contextualize it in terms of sharing of ideas, transformations, adaptability. Today in our culture, I think Shakespeare can only enrich us. There is now a definite contribution to inclusivity, and I think it's not just India. I think it's Asia. It's
hmm
Asia which is responding so well. You can have a very Western curriculum, but I myself, as an instructor or as a teacher, I try to keep in mind the sentiments of the audience. So I don't think it's just India. But if you ask me, yes, we do give priority to sharing. A different generations share, not because out of any compulsion, but out of this immense capacity to love and reflect. And
Yeah,
as I said, love becomes one of the essential. triumphs of life, according to me.
So, just going off of that remark, how would you see, the expression of love in Shakespeare? Because in some of his plays, we kind of get an example of how an excess of love can lead to tragedy, like what you would see in Romeo and Juliet, for instance, or love of material or love of self, like you see with Iago, that leads to tragedy in Othello.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, you know what? The way I would like to answer this beyond gender boundaries is to say there is a Juliet in all of us. There is a Juliet in all of us. If I were to speak on behalf of women, and so is there a Desdemona who can challenge the system.
Hmm.
Although, there is a tragedy, let's leave it at that. So I feel the characters are so rich in terms of expression, in terms of honesty, in terms of undertaking, let's say, adventure,
Yeah.
okay, in their lives, that it spills over. I honestly cannot, just categorize Juliet separately or say she is a Western woman. It doesn't matter
Or a
because
teenager,
we
for that
go back
matter.
to this yes, yes. If it goes back to this universal appeal, which unfortunately nowadays people seem to dismiss it by saying, how can you call things universal? But you see, where I think we are dealing with largely our own sense of self. And I think it is literature which kind of, galvanizes all these emotions. So, irrespective of gender. At the same time, I would like to say that I'm proud of the fact that so many theater productions have taken place in India, not just in major cities like New Delhi or Bombay or Bangalore or Chennai, but also there are regional adaptations. So it's interesting to see some of the things which highlight an emotional crisis. And I think we have to respect women and we have to identify with how women operate or manage in such a way that they are able to speak for themselves.
So that's kind of interesting because at least here in the United States and in the UK and other places like the UK or Canada, every city, town, state, region, they have a company or a production of Shakespeare that they do every year. Um,
Yes.
would you be able to talk about what it's like to produce Shakespeare in India and what that looks like?
Well, all I can say is, frankly, I'm a city person. So I have been engaged with not exactly the entire production, but engaged with encouraging people to participate in what I see as declamation. It's a starting point. And I have found that once the interest is triggered, what happens is we all meet at the same plane. It doesn't matter whether you are in New York or whether you are in New Delhi. Why I say this is because the idea is to reinvent maybe the character as per the context so that the message gets through as well as the interest remains for others to continue. I hope you understand what I mean.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I think,
Because
yeah, in it, yeah, please go ahead.
yeah, no, yeah, I was gonna say because because you do want to make the characters and make the play, make the story relevant and appealing to your current audience, but at the same time you also want to stay true to what its core values are, right? I mean, it's like
Yeah.
it's like for instance, I'll use Sherlock Holmes for instance, because that's the character that I really enjoy reading, because you can have one iteration of Sherlock Holmes in that's set in the Victorian times, like you would see in Conan Doyle's book, but at the same time you could have a modern adaptation of Sherlock Holmes that's set the 21st century, but you still recognize it's Sherlock Holmes because of his core values and the basic idea of who he is as a person. So, as long as you retain the basic idea of who, let's say, Hamlet is, for instance, who is this
Yes,
melancholic person who is driven by revenge, if you
yes,
maintain that basic idea, I mean, you can adapt him any way you want. You can, adapt him let's say during, in the US or in India or in South Africa or Russia, for instance,
yes.
but the character would still be the same because you recognize the basic idea of who he is.
Exactly. I agree entirely with you. I think the basic stuff, the core has to be comprehended, understood. At the same time, I think the person who is performing the part, and I have engaged myself as an educator and not exactly as a known director, but somewhere down the line, to
Hmm.
encourage the character not only to exhibit what is expected essentially, but also to push the envelope. In my mind, what that does is that is going to keep Shakespeare alive. Because, for example, I'm not trying to eulogize, but when I saw the Japanese adaptation, Kurosawa, I
Hmm.
never expected that kind of film or whatever, but it is somewhere in my mind without any indoctrination from any teacher or any person. So, somewhere down the line, I think we have to respect performance as well. It's not just about reading Shakespeare and teaching Shakespeare. It is can you inspire? Can the legacy continue? And I think it's up to each person who is involved that if you can push the boundaries, that is my maybe that is it not only inspirational, but is that it's intentional on my part.
Yeah, because every actor who performs Shakespeare, they put their own spin on it. It's kind of like how they say Hamlet is the most coveted role because there are just so many different
Yes.
ways to interpret Hamlet, and yet still remain true to the character. Um, so I do want to ask. So you are an educator. Mainly, can you talk about how how you approach teaching Shakespeare to younger people, and what is your aim to try to inspire younger people to appreciate Shakespeare? Because I watched a video on GB News a few weeks ago where they were asking this teacher about how relevant is Shakespeare today, and he said that, well, Shakespeare isn't really relevant, and I balked at the idea because I was like, well, Shakespeare has a lot of lessons to teach us,
Exactly.
regardless of
Mhm.
whether you're a boomer or millennial or Gen Z. So I wanted to get your take and see what what your philosophy or what your approach is to instructing younger people on Shakespeare and how to make them appreciate it and not just see it as some boring writer that everybody is forced to learn.
Yeah, I see it as a challenge, but I think I'm doing a fairly good job of it. One of the ways is to um, get people interested in cultural values and bring it up to social and intellectual values. Once students can respond, then it is the time. What I would see as introductory lectures. I don't start talking about Shakespeare ABC.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah.
once students relate to cultural and social norms, as well as, let's say, as I said, universally, students nowadays are more in tune as what is going on in the universe, and
Hmm.
then related to, let's say, a Shakespearean text in such a way that we follow the common. the common points like bonds, togetherness, father daughter relationship, jealousy, rage, envy, and then
Hmm.
slowly bring up the text, in which case the student is able to at least identify with what is going on in the classroom. At the same time, uh, those given some time on their own, I encourage them to ask questions without unconditionally, which means that without hesitation. What that does is it makes the class interactive. And once you have managed one or two texts, then the field is yours. Why? Because there is a rehashing also. I have to admit, I mean, it's not just Hamlet or Juliet or Romeo and Juliet, which are by far the most popular play. But
Yeah.
it's like, look at what is going on in your country. You know, there is a betrayal. And hey, let's talk about Julius Caesar. You know, so it's up to the instructor to integrate things in such a way that the audience is neither intimidated, neither, or, you know, very skeptical about reading Shakespeare. And as I said, there are other ways, because if you have a dramatic representation, if you have a declamation contest, and if you have people who, for example, I belong to the Shakespeare Society of India. So annually there is one play which is done. So, you know, to give a hand without, you know, because there are more experienced directors, you know, and people. So we work as a team. And then I've seen progressively every year the performances are getting better, and I'm very glad about it. Of course, it's in English. That has to be there, because it's not that easy. You know, while regional representations are necessary, I think, I mean, give people something so that they understand life, they understand
Hmm.
existence, you know. And for a person like me who is also teaching and reading and so on and so forth, I find it very not only illuminating, but I find it a challenge. As I said, it's a challenge to yourself how to put things across to people without sounding like a, you know what I mean, sounding like a freak. You know, I'm a Shakespeare
Yeah.
fan, you know.
Yeah. Exactly.
Which,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. So uh, I feel I'm onto the challenge. That's all I can say at the moment.
Hmm.
Uh, there are other people who have inspired me. Bernard Shaw, uh, I think great dramatist. Ramayan from our own culture, which is, you know, it's like a potpourri, it's a myriad of interest. It will continue to amaze, diffuse, add, subtract. So, uh, 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 all these epical um, productions have to be done or related to with an open mind. And that's
Yeah.
how the creativity part comes in. Yes, yes,
So, so I do want to circle back. So when you start off with introducing students to Shakespeare, I'm guessing you talk about the social and historical context first, right? About what about the world that Shakespeare lived in before you dive into the text, correct? Okay. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and I did an interview with an
yeah,
actress and director about this.
yeah, yes. Oh,
Yeah, so I did an interview
see,
with an actress and director a few months ago, and we were chatting about that, and we were talking about the
okay,
world of Tudor politics and how much of a role it played in influencing Shakespeare's writing. Because obviously, the biggest one that comes to mind is Richard II, because because as we know, that was
right,
that play was performed before. before the revolt against Queen Elizabeth I, and Shakespeare got into some pretty hot water over that. And then obviously
Yes.
we can't forget the other history plays because Macbeth was written roughly around the time that James the First was coming out of the throne. But even then, you can look at other plays like Henry V, which was written,
Yes.
which basically is a propaganda piece to kind of just show off, this is how great Britain is.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to ask you, are there any particular
Mm-hmm.
plays of Shakespeare that you find more challenging to teach than others?
Yes, yes, certainly. Look, I find Macbeth, for
Mm-hmm.
example, I know there is a political context to it. So if you're asking me, I would definitely familiarize anybody in terms of audience to first know the political
Mm-hmm.
backdrop before trying to uh, wrap up the play in your head, because it's not a story. For me, Macbeth is a wave of imagination. For me, Macbeth is a rebellion. For me, Macbeth is gender questioning. Lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
plethora of ideas, which so many people have commented on. And so Macbeth has remained a challenge. And yes, I'm aware of the political plays, definitely. I think apart from the political background of the plays in itself, it is important to also familiarize or try to explain things in such a way that there is always a universal appeal. For example, um, how is it that everyone remembers Iago as a green-eyed monster, irrespective of the, of the situation? Because it's easy. It's easy in the sense someone has commented vastly on this jealousy factor. At the same time, one has, apart from the entertainment part, one has to have some knowledge of culture and politics. And nowadays, if you look at it, racism and sexism are some things we cannot dilute. We have to work on it. And I saw that very interestingly. So many people have, noted it and talked about it in Othello, particularly, um, so on and so forth. So,
Mm-hmm.
what an interesting amalgamation of philosophies. So, how can we have one philosophy on Shakespeare? You can't. That in itself is an amalgamation of so many philosophies of conduct. So,
Right.
it's impossible to say, I think this is what he meant. It's a question of humanity. And so long we keep on re examining humanity, we are on. And the idea is to push the boundaries a little bit, because
Yeah.
social change will take place. As social change has taken place all over the world, it's not just Asia or some far flung place.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think it's interesting what you said there because because with all these different ideas ruminating around
yeah,
Shakespeare's plays, I think most people will take an idea that they appeal to first and then apply it to their interpretation of Shakespeare. Like, for instance, feminism or environmentalism or race or racial equality. You can kind of use that as the lens to which they look at Shakespeare's plays. You know.
yes,
So another thing I wanted to ask you too is that when it comes to Shakespeare, obviously he has a universal appeal. Everybody can identify with a character in Shakespeare's
yes, you
plays.
are
I
right.
mean,
Because
whether
what
it's
the other thing
with
I want
Iago
to
or
add on. Okay, sure.
yeah. So I mean, we can all identify with the different characters. I mean, some of us can identify with Iago, some of us can identify with Hal, some of us can identify with Falstaff. But but regardless,
Or Juliet.
yeah,
Hmm.
or yeah, or Juliet. But I mean, like, but regardless, I mean, there is, a character that we all find ourselves gravitating towards because we have an affinity or we see ourselves in them. With that being said, I do want to ask you: have you taught or have you instructed on other writers during that period besides Shakespeare? Like, have you looked at Marlowe or Ben Jonson or anybody else, or are you primarily focused on Shakespeare?
No, I'm afraid I have referred to Marlowe, definitely. It's a whole period, right? And so on and
Hmm.
so forth. But no, no, I have not tried to compare or contrast or anything of the kind. I'll tell you the reason why. I'm
Hmm.
aware of that, and literature honor students have to be aware of contemporary. So that goes without saying. However, I feel we are stepping away from that, that typical, compare and contrast, because I feel there was a time when our teachers would, inadvertently tell us, oh, these are the differences, or, make a note of it at least, if nothing else. Nowadays, I feel that students are far more interrogative and creative. So I feel there is, like I said, change. So the change is also there in the interpretation and teaching. And I feel that teaching becomes, in fact, a very conservative word. What you have to do is you have to relate. You have to relate not only to the text, but to your audience, and maybe bring people together, on
Hmm.
the same page. So it's good to have an encyclopedic knowledge of Marlowe and Wise and so on and so forth. But I feel that the legacy is in fact so powerful. I feel that it it is this exploration of the human mind. I feel that it is an immense contribution to life and to humanities in particular.
So it's more complete in Shakespeare than what you would see in Marlowe, for instance, right?
Definitely.
Okay, gotcha.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely, because that see, those are scholarship debates. I feel. I mean, I understand what you're asking. Those are scholarship debates, and they will go on. But which Marlowe character makes us go into a rage or in a tizzy or in a like people have tears in their eyes when they think about um, Desdemona. We have, for example, an Indian director who made this film, which is just a take on Othello, but he has done a brilliant job in his own way. That what is a woman supposed to do? So it goes back to some basic nerve endings. It goes back to some basic human endeavor. It goes back to things which are raw but in your face. Whether you make, whether you have the frills and the fancies and so on and so forth. And I feel that somewhere down the line, without saying it very explicitly, Shakespeare was also showing us the light, the mirror to social hypocrisy. So obviously, every playwright will be different, and of course, people have a right to compare. But what I would say is, how is it that in everyone's mind there is a Juliet and a Desdemona and a Hamlet and a Macbeth at least? I
Hmm.
mean, if I were to pick up on the popular one, how is it possible? It's there. It's there. Maybe in some other form. Maybe, because there are dozens and dozens of fantastic actors. But it is there, engraved in the memory. And I think that, therefore, I think I would be proud to just contribute even a percent or half a percent in terms of keeping this alive. I think it's important, because if you don't understand emotion, if you don't understand life, if you don't understand your input, how important it is for all of us. we are all unique. Okay, then no philosophy can really make us wise, or you know what I mean, creative, or make us, despite the challenges, um, make us go on. Because if I understand, the US culture is always on move on, move on. But the point here is, of course, you must move on. Point is, don't give up.
Hmm.
Don't give up. There has to be hope. There has to be hope in life and love. If you don't have that, I think it is so elementary, but people don't understand it.
Yeah,
People
it's a
feel, oh, give up. Yeah.
yeah, it's a very simple lesson to remember, and yet we conveniently forget it.
Yes, we do, because we are so boxed in our own expectations, that we have to prize certain things, and we have to prize life and emotion and what we learn from it. So that is how I feel that uh, it's important for all of us. Hope has to be there, some shade of optimism has to be there along with the challenges. So I think literature is a great contribution, and especially uh, um, studies, studying Shakespeare, living Shakespeare, analyzing Shakespeare, I think.
So what does the future look like? Do you see a growth in appreciation for Shakespeare, or is there a decline, or is it sort of like in the middle? What does that look like?
You will be surprised. I think there is a growth. There is a
Okay.
growth. Yes, in I was pleasantly surprised. I think I said it somewhere down the line when we were talking, that I have come across um, regional representations of Shakespeare's characters done faithfully and to the best of ability. I think, frankly, there is a growth. You will be surprised whenever there is a conference. I'm talking about New Delhi.
Hmm.
Whenever there is a conference on Shakespeare, you will be surprised that number of abstracts are double of what is imagined, and people have to actually choose and filter it down as it happens. So I think, I cannot talk at the global level right now, but I think you'll be surprised that, I mean, apart from English, there are so many languages being spoken. But as I said, it's a triumph. It's a triumph of this kind of uh, investigation of emotions. Even a person who is not very educated has heard of some Romeo and Juliet and Macbeth.
Right. Right. And they
Yeah,
do get adapted,
yeah, in the
and they do get
interior
adapted into
part.
films in India also, don't they?
Yes, yes. The film part is not that much. It had not that much, but uh, to have it in regional languages, I find that was a real contribution and growth. And I think I can answer it in terms that it is very creative, and one just needs the courage to keep this up instead of making it some dying art or something like that. I think there is growth. At least I can answer for my country.
Excellent. So I want to go ahead and just wrap it up. But before we sign off, if people want to learn more about you or your work, where can they go? How can they learn more about Shakespeare in India?
Hmm. Can you repeat the question, please? I didn't get you.
Yeah. So if people want to learn more about your work or about Shakespeare in India, where can they go? Is there like a website or Facebook page that they can check out?
Oh, okay. You mean in terms of the formality? Okay,
Yeah.
that's great to hear. But unfortunately, um, I have not exactly made any. My contributions have been different, more inside the classroom and on the stage. But in due time, I'm planning to have a kind of, a website where
Okay.
I can, maybe answer things for people. or respond in such a way that they would find it they would find it beautiful to study Shakespeare, to relate to it, or something like that. So unfortunately, right now I only have my email address, but I'm ready to help any help in the sense, you know, contribute creatively to any organization or individual. Um, uh, I think that would be very meaningful for me. Frankly, I enjoy it. I enjoy
Gotcha.
it.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Well, Nita, I really want to thank you for taking the time to be on this podcast, and I just want to thank you, and you're welcome back anytime. So thank you so
Sure.
much. But I hope you
Sure.
have a great day, and I just want to thank
Yeah.
everybody for watching, and we'll catch you in the next
Yeah.
one. Bye.
Thank you so much. You have